0-100 on April 8, 1943. At an altitude of 27,000 feet above Caen, France, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachine of the Luftwaffe peered through the crystal-clear canopy of his Faller-Wolf 190A5. The veteran ace, who had seen action over Yagkashevada, observed the American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe. 0-12. Die armies have sent us flying milk bottles, he transmitted to his wingman, unable to contain his laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling to gain altitude. 0-24 below, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group labored upward in tight formation, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines straining to propel the heavy aircraft. The hulking American aircraft strained against their 7-ton frames, a stark contrast to the sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters the German pilots were accustomed to. With their barrel-shaped fuselages, greenhouse canopies, and wings that seemed disproportionately small, these planes appeared almost comical. Yet, the propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory foreshadowed a formidable power. What the German pilots circling above like wolves failed to grasp was that they were witnessing the arrival of a weapon that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter force. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror, their 8.5 Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in the German skies. The skies were pregnant with the mathematics of annihilation, as the broad wings carried a lethal payload. With 3,400 rounds of ammunition and a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, the concentrated firepower could shred a target in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began on that fateful April morning when Major Donald Blee, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation maneuvering for attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had recently transitioned from RAF Spitfires, knew that survival in the P-47 required abandoning the dogfighting tactics they had mastered. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy, a stark contrast to the German approach. Republic Aviation had crafted an unprecedented aerial behemoth, a high-altitude juggernaut that redefined the rules of aerial warfare through its sheer mass, power, and firepower. Diverging from the pursuit of nimble interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, this formidable machine had emerged. On that fateful morning of April 8, 1943, the French skies were graced by the presence of 56 American pilots, some of whom would go on to become legendary aces, striking fear into the hearts of the Luftwaffe. Yet, on that day, they were mere novices, facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans, who had been in continuous combat since 1939, with veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, in contrast, had yet to see a single day of combat. This is the story of that pivotal moment. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a formidable aircraft, emerged from the chaos of June 1940 as the United States Army Air Force sought a high-altitude interceptor to counter the Luftwaffe's dominance. Alexander Kartveli, the Georgian-born chief designer at Republic Aviation, received the urgent specifications and crafted a behemoth that defied expectations. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli confessed to his team, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The Thunderbolt's industrial logic triumphed over tactical brilliance, as its sheer quantity and quality overwhelmed the enemy. German pilots, once confident, soon faced the terror of the Thunderbolt's synchronized Browning machine guns at a range of 400 yards. The aircraft's capabilities had transformed the tide of the war, proving that industrial might and engineering prowess could outmaneuver even the most skilled adversaries. The XP-47B prototype, which took to the skies for the first time on May 6, 1941, astonished all who laid eyes upon it. Weighing a staggering 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, at a hefty 9,900 pounds empty, this aircraft was a true marvel of engineering. The massive turbo supercharger system, with its intricate network of ducts winding through the rear fuselage, gave the plane an almost gravid appearance. Test pilots approaching the XP-47B for the first time couldn't help but wonder if this peculiar-looking machine could truly take to the skies. But not only did it fly, it soared like no other at high altitudes. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial power plant producing a mighty 2,000 horsepower, allowed the aircraft to maintain full power even at 27,000 feet, where German fighters struggled to breathe. The turbo supercharger, fed by the engine's exhaust gases, ensured the XP-47B's dominance in the skies. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a remarkable aircraft, defied conventional wisdom by delivering exceptional performance at high altitudes where traditional superchargers struggled. Major Hubert Hub ZKA, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training in Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially viewed the plane with disdain. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit suffered heavy losses, with 18 pilots and 41 aircraft lost in training accidents. The Thunderbolt proved deadlier to American pilots than the Germans in the early months of combat, as it exhibited a propensity for ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, and enthusiastic dives that led pilots to encounter the phenomenon of compressibility, rendering their controls frozen by shock waves forming on the wings. However, those who mastered the aircraft discovered its extraordinary capabilities. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, would go on to become one of the war's most celebrated aces. One of America's preeminent aerial champions, boasting an impressive tally of 27 victories, vividly recounted his initial flight experience. He likened it to being strapped to a locomotive, with the sheer power being utterly astonishing. Piloting the aircraft was less about flying and more about aiming it. The initial combat encounters in the spring of 1943 only served to validate every German preconception. The P-47 fighters proved incapable of matching the Focke-Wulf 190's in turning ability, struggled to keep pace with the Messerschmitt 109's in climb rate, and could not rival their nimble handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly devised tactics to exploit these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts faltered, and forcing turning engagements where agility outweighed firepower. Feldwebel Joseph, Pips, Priller, the commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported back to headquarters after his first encounter. The American fighter was proving to be a formidable challenge for our pilots. Its lumbering flight characteristics and sluggish maneuverability earned it unflattering nicknames from our airmen, who likened it to a cumbersome truck or a slow-climbing bovine. The statistics from the first month of combat operations seemed to validate German confidence, with the American fighter groups sustaining heavy losses of their Thunderbolt aircraft while only managing to down a handful of our planes. Even the observant RAF pilots, flying their nimble Spitfires, quietly suggested that the Americans reconsider their choice of fighter, with some joking that the best evasive tactic in a P-47 was to simply unbuckle and move around the spacious cockpit. However, unbeknownst to German intelligence, something remarkable was unfolding in those early aerial engagements. The Thunderbolt fighters that were downed had endured astonishing damage before succumbing. One such aircraft, returning from a mission on May 4 at 7:50, bore 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have torn apart a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. Yet the Thunderbolt's massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have crippled a liquid-cooled fighter. 808 More crucially, when the P-47s unleashed their firepower, the results were 814 catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's armament created a convergence zone of 819 devastation that German aviators had never encountered. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of 825 early warfighters or the cannon with limited ammunition, the American fighter could sustain intense fire for an extended period. The passage of time can be fleeting in the chaos of aerial warfare. A pivotal moment that would reshape German perspectives unfolded on June 26, 1943 over the skies of Lazo, France. This encounter, involving 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, would become the stuff of legend for both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47 Thunderbolts was returning from an escort mission when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hedwig Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a flawless attack, diving from the sun with a decisive speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the rear of the formation, found itself caught in the crosshairs. The pilot found himself in a perilous situation, his aircraft under a barrage of fire from multiple adversaries. Within moments, the onslaught had taken a devastating toll, with 2,120 mm cannon shells detonating across the airframe. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid spraying into the cockpit, the engine cowling torn away, and flames erupting behind the instrument panel. Though wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, Johnson attempted to eject, only to discover the canopy jammed shut, a 20 mm shell having welded it in place. Trapped in a crippled aircraft at an altitude of 27,000 feet, the pilot faced a dire predicament. Yet, in a remarkable display of resilience, he persevered, navigating the oil-covered windscreen and a barely functioning engine, defying the conventional assumptions about the limits of combat damage tolerance. The Thunderbolt aircraft shuddered violently at 10:15, and its controls responded only sporadically. Yet, through skillful piloting, Johnson managed to stabilize the plane and steer it toward England. Despite the extensive damage, the P-47 continued its flight, a testament to its resilience, a feat that would have been impossible for most other fighters. Tragically, the ordeal was not over. At 10:34, a lone Focke-Wulf 190, flown by an unidentified pilot from the 2nd Staffel of Jagdgeschwader 26, spotted the crippled Thunderbolt as it limped across the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical records have never conclusively named this German aviator, though several candidates have been proposed based on combat reports from that day. What followed was one of the most extraordinary aerial encounters in history. The Focke-Wulf pilot maneuvered behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire at 11:03. The massive 420 mm cannon and twin 13 mm machine guns of the enemy aircraft bore down on Johnson's position. Trapped behind his armored plating, the pilot could only hunker down and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the full barrage of cannon fire at 11:15. Undeterred, the German pilot repositioned and unleashed a hail of machine gun rounds at 11:22. With his cannon ammunition depleted, the young, blonde adversary pulled alongside the crippled American fighter at 11:27, his expression shifting from confidence to bewilderment, even a hint of trepidation. Repositioning once more, the German emptied his remaining machine gun ammo into the Thunderbolt at 11:43, yet the battered aircraft continued to fly. Shaking his head in apparent amazement, the enemy pilot offered an informal salute before peeling away. The young pilot's P-47 Thunderbolt touched down at Manston Airfield, its engine sputtering, having endured a relentless barrage. The ground crew soon discovered the aircraft riddled with over 200 bullet holes. One shell had detonated mere inches from the pilot's head, while another had struck the armored plate behind his seat. The engine had sustained direct hits, and the control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main structural beams of the fuselage had been shot through, yet the resilient aircraft had safely returned its pilot. The miraculous survival of this American fighter sent shockwaves through both air forces. Examining the battle-scarred wreckage, U.S. engineers realized they had underestimated the capabilities of their own creation. Meanwhile, German intelligence closely studied the combat reports, gaining valuable insights. The Thunderbolt, a formidable American fighter plane, had astonished all with its remarkable resilience. Pilots marveled as it withstood the Luftwaffe's fiercest assaults, defying expectations. By mid-1943, American aviators had learned to harness the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zena, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, had uncovered the secret through rigorous experimentation. Avoid turning or climbing with the enemy at low altitudes, but leverage the aircraft's weight, power, and firepower. What was once viewed as a drawback, the Thunderbolt's substantial mass now became a tactical advantage. In a dive, the P-47 was unmatched, capable of reaching devastating speeds from an altitude of 30,000 feet. The Thunderbolt's unparalleled speed and climb rate gave American pilots a decisive advantage over their German counterparts. Capable of reaching a blistering 550 miles per hour, the P-47 was 13 minutes and 37 seconds faster than any Luftwaffe fighter, even in a vertical dive. This remarkable velocity could be converted into altitude through a zoom climb that left pursuing aircraft hopelessly behind. Captain Walker, Bud Mahurin, who would become one of the first American aces in the European theater, pioneered the now legendary boom and zoom tactic, which pilots affectionately dubbed the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than engage in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would ascend to an altitude of 30,000 feet, well beyond the effective operating ceiling of German fighters. When the Luftwaffe interceptors appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting virtually impossible for the defending pilots. The American heavy machine guns unleashed a thunderous barrage during these aerial engagements. Veteran German aviators who lived to tell the tale described it as facing an impenetrable wall of lead. The combined firepower created a zone of devastation from which there was no escape. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern did not simply fall, they were utterly shredded. The true extent of American aerial might was unveiled during the dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted up to that point. This mission would showcase both the limitations of the P-47 fighter, in terms of its range even with drop tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when employed to its full potential. Leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, Major David Schilling encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack the B-17 bombers. The formidable German fighters, equipped with potent cannon and rocket armaments, were the Luftwaffe's specialized interceptors, though less agile than their twin-engine counterparts. Schilling's squadron of 4 Thunderbolts commenced their attack dive from an altitude of 28,000 feet. Gunner Heinrich Roth, a survivor of the Messerschmitt 110, later recounted his experience during a post-mission interrogation. The American fighters descended upon their targets with devastating force. Roth opened fire at a range of 800 meters, scoring direct hits on the fighter's wing. Yet the P-47 remained unfazed, before unleashing a lethal barrage. The aircraft ahead was not merely shot down, but utterly destroyed, its wings severed from the fuselage, the tail ripped off, and the crew compartment reduced to shredded metal. This catastrophic disintegration occurred in a mere 2 seconds. The skies erupted in a furious display of aerial dominance as the American P-47 fighters unleashed their devastating firepower. In a matter of seconds, 8 of the enemy's Messerschmitt 100s and 10s were reduced to smoldering wrecks, a sight that left the German pilots utterly bewildered. Each P-47 carried a formidable arsenal of 425 rounds per gun, totaling a staggering 3,400 rounds that weighed nearly 900 pounds. At the convergence distance of 300 yards, the ballistic paths of all 8 guns intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter, subjecting anything within to a relentless barrage of 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at an astounding 2,900 feet per second. The sheer scale of American industrial capacity was on full display, as the pilots enjoyed an abundance of ammunition that contrasted sharply with the limited cannon rounds available to their German counterparts, typically ranging from 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon. This overwhelming firepower allowed the American pilots to maintain a sustained and devastating assault, leaving their foes no chance to escape the onslaught. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a formidable American fighter plane, left a lasting impression on the skies of Europe during World War II. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would become the top American ace in the theater with 28 victories, vividly described the devastating impact of its firepower. When the Thunderbolt's 8 guns unleashed their deadly payload, the results were nothing short of explosive. Gabreski recounted witnessing a Messerschmitt 109 being literally split in half, with the tail falling one way and the nose and wings the other, leaving the pilot no chance to react. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was facing another alarming reality about the P-47. As the German fighters struggled, the Thunderbolt's performance soared dramatically with increasing altitude, thanks to its turbo-supercharged double-row radial engine. This technological edge gave the American pilots a distinct advantage in the high-altitude battles that would unfold in the skies over Europe. The Wasp engine maintained its full power output up to an impressive 30,000 feet in altitude. In contrast, German fighters relying on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers experienced a significant decline in performance above 25,000 feet. This reality proved fatal for Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, on October 8, 1943. Leading his Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The powerful BMW 801 engine, which excelled at medium altitudes, was struggling to breathe nearly 6 miles above the Earth's surface. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were unable to effectively engage their American counterparts. The seasoned combat aviator, Robert Johnson, was soaring at an altitude of 31,000 feet when he caught sight of Philipp's distinctive aircraft, adorned with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was succinct, as he opened fire from a range of 300 yards and a 30-degree deflection. Observed impacts were noted along the entire fuselage, and the enemy aircraft subsequently exploded, with no parachute sighting. Philipp's demise sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe ranks. If one of their finest, a pilot who had endured over 500 combat missions on both Eastern and Western fronts, could not withstand the Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? The German High Command promptly ordered a comprehensive investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The findings were swiftly delivered to Reich Marshal. In the autumn of 1943, the situation for Hermann Göring was increasingly dire. The Thunderbolt boasted an impressive service ceiling exceeding 42,000 feet, surpassing the reach of any German fighter aircraft. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier, while its armor included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a 1/2-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates around the engine. Most alarmingly, the Thunderbolt's robust construction allowed it to endure damage that would cripple 3 conventional fighters, yet still make it back to base. By January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 had begun arriving in England, completing the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with 13-foot diameter paddle blades and broad chord blades. The mighty P-47 Thunderbolt had undergone a remarkable transformation. Its towering propeller now sliced through the air with unprecedented force, propelling the aircraft skyward at astonishing rates. Where earlier models had struggled to reach a mere 2,200 feet per minute, these upgraded variants could now soar at an impressive 3,000 feet per minute, matching or even surpassing the performance of their German counterparts. The massive propeller also enhanced the Thunderbolt's acceleration, allowing it to build energy more rapidly in level flight. Veteran pilot Hedman Heinz Knoker of Jagdgeschwader 11, with over 200 combat missions under his belt, encountered these new Thunderbolt variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. In his combat diary, he wrote, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our." The Thunderbolt's distinctive roar, generated by its high-speed propeller blades, became a harbinger of doom for German forces on the ground. The aircraft's transformed sound, a deep, ominous rumble, allowed enemy troops to identify the approaching P-47s by ear alone, earning it the chilling moniker, Donnerschlag, or thunderclap. This formidable capability, a byproduct of the paddle blade propeller's performance enhancements, had evolved far beyond the machines the Luftwaffe had once dismissed. In a harrowing encounter, the Thunderbolts' newfound prowess proved decisive, as a German fighter was swiftly destroyed, leaving only smoke and fragments in its wake. By March 1944, the P-47s, equipped with this transformative technology, had become a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. The Thunderbolt's external fuel tanks allowed it to accompany bombers deep into German territory, with the standard setup featuring either two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending the aircraft's range beyond 1,000 miles. The paddle blade propeller's enhanced performance enabled the Thunderbolt to maintain combat readiness even when carrying the additional fuel. Faced with this formidable escort, the Luftwaffe resorted to targeting the bombers, hoping to inflict sufficient losses and halt the American daylight offensive. However, this strategy required German pilots to penetrate the P-47 screen, an increasingly perilous undertaking. Consequently, even renowned aces like Major Garal, who had amassed 275 victories primarily on the Eastern Front, developed a grudging respect bordering on fear for the American fighters. Pilot 2318 endured a harrowing encounter with P-47 fighters on March 6, 1944, emerging from the clash severely injured. In a post-war interview, 2325 he recounted the event, recalling, "We spotted them high above, their bulky silhouettes stark against the sun. Someone joked, 'Look, the flying pigs have arrived.' But the levity vanished in mere seconds. 2330 they descended like an avalanche, moving faster than we could respond. The initial 2343 attack obliterated 3 of our aircraft, reducing them to flaming wreckage. Their guns did not fire in bursts 2351 like ours, but unleashed unrelenting streams of fire. Getting caught in that torrent 2357 meant instant annihilation." The escort missions also revealed another P-47 2403 advantage: endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power, consuming the mighty American radial engines of the Thunderbolts allowed them to soar effortlessly at high altitudes. These fighters could accompany the bombers for extended durations, rotating aerial cover while conserving sufficient fuel for combat and return. As more agile P-51 Mustangs arrived in the spring of 1944 to assume long-range escort duties, the P-47 units increasingly focused on ground assault, a role that would cement their reputation as the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. This transition gained momentum in April 1944 as the Allies readied for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's formidable machine gun armament proved equally devastating against ground targets. Their standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire unleashed by these guns struck terror into the hearts of the enemy. The P-47 Thunderbolt's immense firepower was a force to be reckoned with. A mere 2-second burst could unleash 160 half-inch projectiles onto an area the size of a truck, decimating soft targets in seconds. But it was the addition of bombs and rockets that truly transformed this aircraft into a versatile multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry an impressive payload, with 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load rivaling that of early war medium bombers. Later models went even further, integrating zero-length rocket stubs that could launch 10 high-velocity 5-inch aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105 mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced the wrath of the P-47's ground attacks firsthand. The sheer volume of firepower these aircraft could deliver must have been a daunting sight for the enemy forces. The pilots' faces were clearly visible as the aircraft swooped in at an extremely low altitude. The deafening roar of the engines and the shriek of the rockets were utterly terrifying. Then came the relentless hammering of the heavy machine guns. In a single pass, an entire column of our trucks was simply obliterated, transformed into a smoldering heap of wreckage. The psychological impact on the troops was devastating. They referred to these fearsome aircraft as jabos or fighter bombers, but they were something far more formidable, flying artillery with the precision of snipers. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe learned just how dramatically the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47 Thunderbolts provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were met with fierce resistance. The skies over the beachhead were dominated by the American Air Forces on that fateful day. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the shores, reported the airspace was firmly under the control of the Thunderbolts. From the surface up to an altitude of 30,000 feet, the American fighters were arrayed in formidable numbers. Our own aerial assault at dawn was swiftly repelled, with only a single pilot from the group of 12 returning safely. The P-47s had established an impenetrable barrier, denying us any avenue of approach, whether climbing or diving, as their devastating firepower reduced our fighters to shrapnel. In the weeks following the D-Day landings, the Thunderbolts systematically dismantled German mobility during daylight hours. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, the 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles. The Luftwaffe's aerial dominance was shattered as the Allies unleashed their formidable P-47 Thunderbolt fighters. These robust aircraft inflicted staggering losses, destroying 3,752 enemy vehicles and 4,553 horse-drawn transports. Forced to move under the cover of darkness, the Wehrmacht found its responsiveness severely impaired by this aerial onslaught. Desperate countermeasures, such as reinforced armor, increased anti-aircraft defenses, and novel camouflage techniques, all proved futile against the Thunderbolts' unparalleled speed, protection, and firepower. Even the dreaded 88mm flak guns struggled to engage these agile, low-flying fighters. Concurrently, the P-47s were demonstrating their versatility in the Pacific theater, where the 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered the aircraft's suitability for the vast distances and harsh conditions of that theater. The Pacific War witnessed the emergence of innovative aerial strategies. Colonel Neil Kirby, leading the 348th Squadron, pioneered specialized tactics for this theater. On October 11, 1943, Kirby spearheaded 4 P-47 fighters against a formation of 40 Japanese aircraft over Waiwak, personally downing 6 enemy planes in a single sortie, a feat that earned him the prestigious Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging nimble yet fragile American fighters, were caught off guard by the P-47's formidable firepower and resilience. Renowned Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered the Thunderbolts over New Guinea, later remarked, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannons, which could easily destroy a P-40, seemed to have little effect. I expended countless rounds into one Thunderbolt, only to watch it continue flying." The Thunderbolt's return fire was truly formidable. Torrents of heavy rounds ripped through the skies, tearing aircraft asunder. The Pacific variant P-47N boasted enhanced fuel capacity, with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending its range to an impressive 2,350 miles. This iteration would escort the mighty B-29s all the way to Japan, proving the fighter's transformation from a short-legged 1943 model to a true long-range weapon. The P-47's evolution found its ultimate validation in clashes with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its blistering 540 mph top speed, should have been untouchable by propeller-driven aircraft. Yet Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch these jets in 2 key situations: during takeoff and landing, when the jets were most vulnerable. The skilled aviator, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Mears of the 352nd Fighter Group, etched his name in history on November 27, 1944, when he became one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me-262 jet with his trusty P-47 Thunderbolt. Diving from an altitude of 28,000 feet, Mears' aircraft reached blistering speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, enabling him to catch the swift jet in level flight. Unaware of the impending danger, the overconfident jet pilot, relying on his speed advantage, never saw the diving Thunderbolt until Meare's guns unleashed a barrage of fire from a distance of 400 yards. Meare's combat report vividly described the dramatic outcome. The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire, with large pieces, including both engines, separating from the fuselage. The pilot did not survive. The concentrated firepower of Meare's .50 caliber guns proved more effective against the jet than anticipated. The dawn of the jet age ushered in a new era of aerial warfare. By the early months of 1945, specialized P-47M variants had been deployed to counter the growing threat posed by German jets and V-1 flying bombs. Equipped with water methanol injection systems that boosted power output to an impressive 2,800 horsepower, and featuring refined aerodynamic profiles, these ultimate Thunderbolts could reach speeds of up to 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet. Fast enough to intercept even the swiftest jet aircraft under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with these formidable P-47s, scored 2 confirmed kills against the advanced Me-262 jet fighters in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized the importance of firepower over pure speed, noting that, the jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery, and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down too. The pinnacle of American industrial prowess was showcased during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's last-ditch effort to cripple Allied air superiority on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their most skilled remaining pilots, launched surprise strikes on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At the Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47 Thunderbolts, the initial assault proved successful. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post, gestured towards the burning planes and jeered, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response would become legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. The Air Force personnel gestured towards the flight line, where ground crews were already moving damaged aircraft aside and preparing hardstands for their replacements. They assured that by the next day, 40 new aircraft would be available. The German pilots' confident expressions quickly faded as they realized the scale of the challenge they faced. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40s had filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe had suffered devastating losses of 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in the Bodenplatte engagement, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. Losses they could never recover from. In contrast, the Americans had lost only 134 aircraft across all the attacked airfields, and these were swiftly replaced within a week. The stark numerical disparity told the story of the Luftwaffe's inevitable defeat. The might of Republic Aviation's production capabilities was on full display. The Thunderbolt, an American fighter plane, was manufactured in staggering quantities during the war, surpassing any other aircraft of its kind. The Farmingdale factory on Long Island reached a remarkable production rate, completing 1 Thunderbolt every hour around the clock at its peak. Meanwhile, the Evansville plant in Indiana, built from scratch in 1942, was churning out an impressive 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D model required an intricate assembly process, involving 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 meticulously machined components, with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Yet, American workers, many of them women with no prior aircraft experience, assembled these complex machines with a level of precision that exceeded even peacetime standards. The Thunderbolt's operational tempo was truly staggering. Each sortie demanded the expenditure of 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of these formidable aircraft undertaking daily missions. By mid-1944, the monthly consumption had surpassed 10 million rounds. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of the many ammunition production facilities, manufactured an astounding 30 million cartridges per month. These rounds were crafted with meticulous precision, with tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable functioning within the Thunderbolt's synchronized gun mechanisms. The fuel demands were equally colossal. During normal flight, each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour, a figure that could escalate to 300 gallons when the water injection system was engaged in combat. By late 1944, the 9th Air Force alone was consuming over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly, all of which had to be transported and delivered. The United States leveraged its industrial prowess to transport fuel across the Atlantic in mass-produced tankers. Pilot training, however, proved even more remarkable. By 1944, the nation was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced programs, outpacing Germany's entire wartime output. Each P-47 pilot underwent rigorous preparation, logging a minimum of 400 flight hours, including 100 in advanced fighters. In contrast, German pilots entered combat with less than 100 total hours by war's end. This disparity manifested in combat, as American aviators arrived in Europe proficient in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics, having honed their skills against captured Luftwaffe aircraft to comprehend their adversaries' capabilities. The American aviators possessed an unparalleled mastery of their aircraft, having meticulously studied technical manuals that their German counterparts had never accessed. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, embodied this training advantage. With 420 hours in his logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47, he had honed his skills through target practice, deflection shooting, and analyzing gun camera footage from actual combat. Consequently, when he embarked on his first mission, he was fully prepared, in stark contrast to the German pilot he faced, who could not match his level of experience. By March 1945, Oberstleutnant Isef Priller, the same pilot who had once dismissed the P-47 as a pregnant cow, was interviewed, reflecting on the stark disparity in capabilities between the American and German air forces. Morale-boosting propaganda officials sought to conceal the complete transformation in German attitudes, deeming a certain statement too demoralizing for public release at 37-30. The Thunderbolt, an unparalleled fighter-bomber, boasts unprecedented firepower. Its weapons never jam, overheat, or run out of ammunition in normal combat. Carrying bombs like a medium bomber and firing rockets like artillery, it fights like a fighter when needed. But beyond the machine, it represents the unlimited American production capacity. For every 10 they lose, 20 are built. When we lose one, it's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors, with ample fuel for training, ammunition for practice, and spare parts for everything. In contrast, we have nothing. The American war machine's relentless might left the once formidable Luftwaffe in shambles by the spring of 1945. Fuel scarcity had grounded the majority of their aircraft, and their veteran pilots had been killed or taken prisoner. Even if they had the planes and the fuel, German aviators confronted a daunting challenge, engaging the P-47 formations that dominated the skies at every altitude. The sound of those American guns, mechanical and precise, struck fear into the hearts of their enemies, a harbinger of the inevitable defeat that loomed. Overwhelming material superiority, not superior tactics or pilots, had buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of steel and lead. The laughter of 1943 had long since given way to the grim realization that the tide had turned irrevocably against them. The skies above the Reich witnessed the final desperate struggles of its once formidable air force. Feldwebel Klaus Brechender, one of the last 39 German pilots trained in 1945, managed a solitary combat mission before the conflict's conclusion. His encounter with the American P-47 Thunderbolts over Leipzig lasted a mere 12 seconds. Brechender recounted the harrowing experience. "I saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters, and my aircraft shook as if struck by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, and the wing tore away. I barely escaped with my life. From his parachute, Bretschender watched helplessly as the Thunderbolts destroyed his entire squadron in under a minute, raining burning aluminum and bodies from the sky. The psychological impact on the beleaguered German pilots was devastating, shattering their once formidable resolve. The medical staff referred to it as "jabot fever," a physical manifestation of stress that occurred when 40.03 Thunderbolts were reported in the vicinity. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and 40.08 Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. 40-14 The distinctive rumble of approaching Thunderbolts triggered panic among ground troops, who knew their only chance of survival was to 40-21 find cover immediately. The final statistics of P-47 operations 40-27 were staggering. In Europe, they destroyed 3,752 German aircraft in aerial 40-34 combat, 3,315 on the ground, as well as 86,000 40-40 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored 40-46 fighting vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn 40-53 vehicles. In the Pacific, they accounted for 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial 41.00 combat and 150 on the ground. The skies above the European theater were a relentless battleground, with the 9th Air Force's P-47 Thunderbolts playing a pivotal role. These formidable aircraft flew an astounding 213,873 combat sorties, dropping 120,000 tons of bombs and unleashing 135 million rounds of ammunition, along with 60,000 rockets. Their prowess was undeniable, achieving a remarkable 4.61 kill ratio in aerial combat while maintaining the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. However, the human toll was staggering. The Luftwaffe suffered approximately 28,000 pilots killed in action against the Western Allies, many succumbing to the relentless fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of training that Germany could never replace. By the war's end, the average German fighter pilot had a mere 150 hours of flight experience, a stark contrast to the seasoned veterans they faced. The young aviator possessed scant combat experience, a mere 30 hours under their belt. In contrast, the average P-47 pilot had amassed an impressive 42 hours and 11 minutes over the course of 200 sorties. At the Luftwaffe's interrogation center in Ober-Ursel, captured Allied pilots underwent rigorous debriefing by German intelligence, their accounts meticulously recorded. The file seized in 1945 shed light on the German military's evolving assessment of Allied aircraft. The dossier on the P-47, continuously updated throughout the war, charted a remarkable reversal of opinion. In April 1943, the P-47 was deemed a large, unwieldy fighter, inferior to German types in every performance metric save dive speed. Its machine gun armament was deemed insufficient against the cannon-armed enemy fighters, posing a minimal threat. By December 1943, the assessment had shifted dramatically. The P-47 now boasted exceptional high-altitude capabilities and extreme structural resilience, though its firepower was increasingly problematic. Crucially, the pilots had demonstrated improved tactics, rendering the P-47 a significant threat above 25,000 feet. This re-evaluation was cemented by June 1944. The mighty P-47 Thunderbolt stood as a formidable fighter bomber, surpassing all German aircraft above 20,000 feet. Its devastating firepower of 43-18 proved devastating against any target. Remarkably, the Thunderbolt's structural integrity made it extremely difficult to shoot down. In March 1945, this assessment deemed the P-47 a critical threat at all altitudes, the best fighter bomber of the war. Its unmatched combination of firepower, durability, and performance was complemented by exceptional pilot quality, rendering it virtually unserviceable in direct engagement. Decades later, in 1985, a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, saw former adversaries meet in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, the former head of the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, was asked about the P-47. His recorded response captured the complete transformation in perspective. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed." The United States aviation industry had a unique approach to fighter design, diverging from European norms. Contrary to initial perceptions, they did not attempt to emulate existing European fighter models. Instead, they engineered an American-centric fighter optimized for mass production, firepower, and survivability. This strategic focus proved prescient, as the war of attrition demanded aircraft that could withstand punishment and deliver devastating ordnance. The first-hand experience of piloting a captured P-47 Thunderbolt after the war was a revelatory moment, showcasing the raw power, exceptional climb rate, comfortable cockpit, excellent visibility, and precise handling characteristics of this pilot-centric, armored fighter. This American-designed aircraft represented a departure from conventional fighter design, a testament to their understanding of the evolving aerial combat landscape. Astonishingly, the United States constructed over 15,000 of these intricate machines while engaged in a global conflict on two fronts. Each unit housed an engine more sophisticated than anything produced in Germany. Yet, they were assembled at a faster rate than the production of simple fighter aircraft. This realization made it clear that victory was never in doubt. These weapons, affectionately dubbed Roosevelt's pianos, due to their distinctive sound, left an indelible mark on all who encountered them. Tragically, many of my comrades heard that unforgettable melody for the final time. The P-47 Thunderbolt not only triumphed over the Luftwaffe, but utterly decimated it. The design of this aircraft perfectly encapsulated the American industrial ethos, brute force engineering backed by limitless resources. Every component was intentionally overbuilt and overpowered, reflecting the nation's unwavering determination to secure victory. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a marvel of engineering, designed to withstand the rigors of aerial combat. Its wing spars could support an astonishing 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount was engineered to withstand forces up to 12 grams, ensuring the plane's stability even in the most demanding maneuvers. The control cables were doubled throughout, with automatic backup systems in place to maintain control in any situation. The ammunition feed system was a true engineering feat. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, were fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during critical moments. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at high altitudes, and each had its own charging mechanism, allowing for individual synchronization. The convergence of the guns could be adjusted from 150 to 400 yards, enabling pilots to optimize their engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans continued to marvel at the P-47's exceptional capabilities, a testament to the meticulous design and engineering that went into this formidable aircraft. The P-47 Thunderbolt's triumph was a testament to the power of quantity over quality. While German fighters boasted superior technical capabilities, they were ultimately overwhelmed by the sheer number of American aircraft. However, the combat records tell a different story. In engagements where the forces were evenly matched, the P-47s consistently emerged victorious. The heavy machine gun armament, once dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved to be more effective in actual combat scenarios. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed the underlying reasons for this. Cannon shells, though individually more destructive, required precise aim and had limited ammunition, typically ranging from 120 to 200 rounds. In contrast, the P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets that virtually guaranteed hits, even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst could deliver at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, ensuring its destruction. The ordnance itself was of exceptional quality. The American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds employed a delayed action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at a scorching 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. In contrast, the German 20mm shells, though heavier, often exploded upon surface contact, resulting in spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt stands as the most massively produced single-engine piston fighter in history. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of certain twin-engine fighters. Its engine generated more power than entire bomber formations from the previous war, and its armaments delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry. Yet, this formidable aircraft was built by the thousands and flown by young pilots barely out of their teens. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a formidable fighter aircraft, emerged from the hands of young mechanics trained in a matter of weeks, and its presence on the battlefield transformed German perceptions from derision to sheer terror in less than 2 years. Seasoned veterans who had faced the Spitfire, Hurricane, and Soviet Yak without flinching would later speak in hushed tones about the P-47, even decades after the war. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D stands among other iconic fighters, its placard detailing the specifications and battle honors, but the true narrative is conveyed by a small display case containing spent .50 caliber shells and a strip of gun camera film. The Focke-Wulf 190 fighter aircraft was no match for the formidable P-47 Thunderbolt. Captured German pilots recounted their initial dismissal of the American planes, describing them as fat, ugly, and incapable of maneuvering. However, their laughter quickly turned to despair as they realized the Thunderbolt's devastating firepower. With 8 synchronized Browning machine guns, the P-47 redefined the dynamics of aerial combat, becoming an instrument of annihilation that decimated the Luftwaffe. The German Luftwaffe once scoffed at the cumbersome American fighter aircraft, but by the war's end, their laughter had been silenced. In the skies above Europe, the roar of American aerial might had decisively turned the tide. The once dominant German pilots had been swept away, leaving the heavens under the unchallenged control of the United States.